Hello everyone. My name is Sirpa Zimal, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of Switzerland Global Enterprise and of Home of Blockchain to this discussion about Web3 and the Metaverse, a Swiss perspective. But before we start, I would like to give a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, you are muted, but if you have questions, you can use the chat feature, the function, and ask a question for the speakers via the chat function. And also the webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be available afterwards as well to view. So with this, I would like to hand over to Alexander Brunner. He's going to moderate the discussion and introduce the speakers.
Thank you, Sirpa, for having me. It's an exciting time. This is an Asia webinar, I was told. Most of us on the call actually are sitting in Zurich, so it's quite early morning. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having time. What I think in the next 60 minutes, what we'll do, obviously we do a quick round of intro for all the participants. Then we dive into the biggest question of all that I get all the time. What is the Web3? What does it do? Why is it important? And maybe then we also zoom in on the fact, why is Switzerland a big player in this ecosystem, which is always a bit of an interesting question, because if you think about Web3, it's decentralized, why would you need a location? But I'm happy to learn about that in the coming 60 minutes. As Sirpa said, if you have any questions and they pop up and I manage to read them while I'm talking, I'll try to integrate them. But I'll also make sure there's enough time at the end for anyone having more specific questions that we can run through and ask them, our participants. So feel free to type anything you want to ask in the chat, and let's get going. So I'm going to ask something very simple and something very hard from our participants. We do a quick round of intro, and I would like to obviously just quickly introduce you in two, 3 sentences why you're in the Web3 space. And what I'm asking for each one of you, and I know that's the hard part, give me in 1 sentence what Web3 is. I know it's a mission impossible. Most people then say it's not that easy, but at least give a try in your view what the Web3 is. I know there are tons of different definitions out there, so I'll be interested to hear what you say. We start with ladies first. Maybe we go sort of to Shanghai, Switzerland. Melissa, why don't you kick it off? Quick intro about yourself, and maybe in 1 line, try to define Web3 from your perspective.
Hello, everyone. My name is Melissa. I'm a Chinese person based in Switzerland right now. So a little bit about myself. So I got into crypto and blockchain back in 2020. I used to work for financial service industry, and now I'm working for 2 projects basically. One is leading the growth and business development for Shiku Metaverse, which is a foundation. Shiku is a foundation actually based in Switzerland. We are the first foundation, Metaverse foundation in Switzerland. At the same time, I also work very closely with our strategic partner, Uni NFT Marketplace, and then on the NFT growth perspective.
Perfect. And now your 1-line definition of Web3 or Metaverse, whatever you prefer.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I'll do it from the Metaverse perspective. I think that would be more closer to the my business here. So 1 line, I think, or also we think, Metaverse is a platform, or we can think about a technology that's going to empower the future of how people collaborate, connect, and do business. That's my 1 line.
Thank you. Well done that you managed to put it in one line, because I've got quite extensive explanations in the past. With that, we go over to someone who hopefully will also know what the Metaverse is. Marta from the Metaverse Association. No, excuse me. What Metaverse? Always get confused. Have to be your maybe introduce yourself, but sorry, I got startled by it because there's not a Metaverse association in Switzerland. I don't want to confuse those two. But Marta, you've been a speaker, a dean about the Metaverse. You hopefully know what it is. Over to you, quick introduction. What do you do? And also maybe have a try a Web3 Metaverse. Thanks.
Okay, so my name is Martha Backenfeld. I'm the Dean and Partner of the Metaverse Academy. I'm also a Metaverse Evangelister, which means I love the Metaverse. I'm very passionate about it. I have over 20 years of financial services in all sorts of different functions as an executive, and the last position was at UBS, also on the executive board. And I find this combination of all my experiences and all the innovation and disruption I have done comes really now to close when we talk about Web3 and the Metaverse. You say, yeah, I should know, and Melissa should know. I think no one knows what the Metaverse is. It's a little bit like when you ask lawyers. So there is no expert, but everyone has a view. So my view, my vision is very much along Melissa, but less from a technology point of view. I think Web3 is the underlying technology. So you have blockchain, you have AI, you have decentralized way of working, which enables us to do much different things. And the Metaverse is really the experiences we can create. So if we think back to our famous Steve Jobs, he always said you have to start with the experience and then you work backwards to technology. So exactly what Melissa says, what kind of experiences are there? You can collaborate, you can socialize. Healthcare is a very big factor, and I'm super excited to talk about it today with all of you.
Thank you very much, Marta. That was a bit more extensive explanation, but still very, very short. Well done. Because again, you know, it's quite a broad topic. It reminds me when I wrote a book in 2019 about the blockchain, and I asked people, what is the blockchain? And one participant said, that's a nasty question to ask. Because yeah, he wanted to go on, you know, explaining the whole concept. Thank you very much. So let's move over to our gentleman. Maybe we first go to Paul. Paul is with Definity. They call themselves the internet computer, a very interesting description. I always try to understand what it is. Paul, maybe a quick introduction about you, Definity, and also your take on Metaverse or Web3. So at the moment we had two people decided to talk about the Metaverse and not Web3. Maybe you, let's see which your take is.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. Yes, I work indeed for the Definity Foundation. My role is I'm the CFO and also am responsible for our partnerships. So the Definity Foundation is indeed a key contributor, Alex, to the Internet Computer, which is a decentralized autonomous organization, a new type of blockchain that the Definity Foundation helped develop. I myself am a financial services guy, so many years in insurance and reinsurance, and some 6 years ago converted into the blockchain world. And to your question about Metaverse, I would say that, or Web3, which is an environment on which the Metaverse is an excellent application, the way I would describe it, Web3 allows us to share our data and to share risks, but still keep the ownership of the creativity around those data. And those are three things that, as a former insurance person, resonate to me, especially the very simple principle that when you want to manage risks, you typically distribute them. You do not want a single point of vulnerability. Switzerland is at the source of the notion of mutuals and insurances. It's very much in the spirit of the Swiss to share things, a cooperative thinking. And it's rule number one in risk management, sharing risks in an intelligent way and understanding what is your net residual risk. And that all to me is kind of a connecting point. And so the Web3 allows us to get the best of both worlds. We have a shared decentralized way of working, but we give back the ownership to those people who are the wonderful creators of these things, like what I see in Melissa's background. It's a good example of the creative things that people put on the Metaverse, and the creators be rewarded for that.
Thank you very much, Paul. You did an amazing task by including Metaverse into the Web3. So you're saying it's one of the applications, the Metaverse of the Web3. I guess the Web3 often is referred as this blockchain-based decentralized economy that you talked about. What is interesting, Paul, we go back to that later. I haven't heard anyone talking about risk and Metaverse. That's a new one I haven't heard before. I'll be interested to hear a bit more about that. But now, last but not least, Sankeet, you're close to the Crypto Valley. You mentioned that you're based in Lucerne. So again, all of us have a Swiss angle, obviously. Quick introduction about yourself and also give us your description of Metaverse or Web3.
Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sankeet Bhatia. I'm CEO at ProDecipher. We are a Swiss startup working on the challenge of supply chain traceability, especially with an angle to help companies be compliant to sustainability claims and certifications, bringing more trust to all kinds of claims that are being made about products and supply chains. So that's kind of our business. We founded the company a year and a half back, so it's been a very interesting journey here in Switzerland, as well as with clients across the world. My take on Web3, so I'm going to choose Web3. Web3 is for me a new kind of internet architecture which combines the advantages of data ownership, what Paul was saying before, with an underlying layer of trust and contracts to kind of interact with each other. Yeah, so that.
I think you're on mute, Sankeet. Your last minute got muted.
Oh, okay. Then maybe it was a very problematic thing I was saying. I don't know. No. Okay. So for me, Web3 is a new kind of internet architecture which brings ownership of data back to the people who own the data, as well as providing an underlying layer of security and contracts to interact with each other. That was how I was finishing. Yes.
Thank you, Sankeet. So the interesting thing, thank you. We got different descriptions now, but we got certain things that I think that pop up often. We got the word data, ownership, trust, decentralization. I think what is interesting, no one of you mentioned the blockchain. I think we agree that it's somehow working or related to the blockchain, whatever you want to call Web3 Metaverse. And maybe as we have an interesting panel, we have now Marta, who's the Metaverse Academy. Apologies for misnaming it. So obviously the top-down view, you see what's going on. Then we have the startup of Sankeet, and then we have protocol sort of startups with Definity and Melissa from. So we have all those different angles. And I just want to maybe starting again with the top-down view, Marta. What have you seen in the last 12 to 24 months that has been most exciting to you from a Metaverse perspective when it comes to use cases or developments? Is it real? It's in the media often. What is your take on the Metaverse? Is it here or are we still waiting for it?
Yeah, I think you asked a question also, which was asked when the internet was established. We all remember, maybe some of us at least, the Letterman show when there was this conversation, what is the internet, what is this for? We have radio. So we have one side, I think, of the coin where people are still in the not knowing and not accepting camp. And then we have obviously the people here on the call who are living it every day. So we also we build in the Metaverse. I've just launched my Metaverse also to get all the experiences, collaboration with other people. So what do I see? Obviously, you have the big names. You have Nike, you have Starbucks with some amazing programs for their clients. You had the Fashion Week with Tommy Hilfiger, all of a sudden across with one brand across different countries, you can say, in the Metaverse, and different little Metaverses. What excites me most are two use cases. And one is healthcare, and the other one is education. So what you can do in education, we only start to discover, and I'm not concerned about basically the kids who are already into the kind of metaverse, not yet open metaverse like Roblox. I'm more concerned about the people who, like us, who are here on the call, can they keep up with this level of education? And we see more and more in education how useful it is to use virtual worlds for education. I think there's absolutely no doubt. All studies prove it. The second part that's super exciting for me is healthcare. So you have doctors training in virtual rooms. That's already becoming quite a standard, which is better than training, if I may say so, not without being disrespectful, is training dead bodies. Yeah, we had a wonderful operation where we could see separation of co-joined twins, also only due to the fact that Brazilian doctors and also doctors in London could work together and could figure out how to do it. We have a lot of digital twins now, not only in healthcare. That would be the third use case, is where we see NVIDIA is massive. NVIDIA is in the industrial metaverse, and they basically do a lot of digital twins for the entire, you can say, technology, AI, and so on, for people like Siemens, BMW. They can work together in virtual worlds. They can figure out the processes. They can design everything. You can say, will they make jobs obsolete? Yeah, to a certain extent, but everyone who has read the latest Goldman Sachs report is huge what comes here. It's the fourth industrial revolution. So use cases, three for me: education, healthcare, and the industrial metaverse. And they're all very, very advanced and very real.
Thank you very much, Marta. So that's healthcare and education as well in industries. Maybe moving on to you, Melissa. Let's have a look at what you're doing, what the marketplace you're working with, NFTs. Can you give us a few examples of what you have been seeing, or what you have been doing with your foundation, your company?
Sure. So, the product we build, Shiku Metaverse, is really a truly decentralized metaverse platform. One of the things that we try to differentiate from other so-called metaverse on the market is that we really want to focusing. One is on people really owning the assets. This is something that we truly think is really, really critical, and that's also the reason why we decided to build on the Internet Computer Protocol, because that's the way that we feel like people can really owning their data. Imagine that you're living in the future, in the one day that you use metaverse on day-to-day business to communicate to a friend, to do your business, and then there's a lot of transactions going on in the metaverse. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone wants to make sure that your assets not controlled by a centralized party, and it can be shut down anytime by anyone. Another key things that we are shaping the metaverse product we are building is really focusing on multi-chain compatible, and also more to say is interoperable, because I think that's also another key piece that people care about it. Like when you actually eventually you spend your money on a certain assets, you wanted to be able to use this assets across different platforms, whether it's across different metaverse or across different digital platform. So interoperability is really something that's quite important and what people cares about. And finally, one thing that we try to differentiate from other metaverse is really, probably can see from my background, this is really just one of the spaces that we built in Shiku. So we built it in a rather high resolution, realistic, futuristic, perspective. There are different type of metaverse. I mean, to be honest, there's no right or wrong, because everyone has their own preference. But the way we decided to build it is because we felt like there will be a closer relationship and a link to the real world business, because what we see metaverse is not just isolated existence, but it's really extension from people's day-to-day life. So we want to give people that more immersive experience. So I think this is our approach of building the metaverse. Maybe one more things I would like to also highlight here, because I really agree with what Marta has said previously regarding to the experience part. And then if you think about previously what I said about the communication, connection, and then collaboration. So metaverse, in my opinion, is really just you can also view it as another another type of storytelling. You think about the whole, storytelling history, right? From how we started from words, languages, and then you start to hear from radio, and then later on you start to watch things from TV, and then from the internet you start to do things on your mobile. Metaverse is really just the next level of immersive experience for storytelling. So if you think about the use cases and the potential, it's huge. You really can use Metaverse to empower everything that you do. I'm giving you an example. If you right now think about many people, recently TikTok has been on, media a lot. And if you think about how people using TikTok, right? It's not just watching short video, but people teach there, people do business there, people sell things there, people and then do all kinds of things there. So in my opinion, the next level of that kind of storytelling is here in the Metaverse, and it's up to everyone, in the world, how you would like to leverage that.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Melissa. I have a question I'll pose now. Maybe we can discuss that later so you can think about it. Where are the users of the Metaverse? Where can I find them? Where are they going? But that's maybe you can think about that, because that's one of the, I guess, the multi-billion-dollar question. But Paul, to you, you're the only one who talked about risk. When I said that, I have a financial background, Marta has a financial background, so probably it resonates somewhere a bit more. But why is that important for the Metaverse or Web3? Why is that something users should consider?
Yeah, I'll come back to that right away, concretely building a bit on what Melissa said, but I really liked one thing that Marta highlighted. It's a bit of a side thought for a dry economist like me, but I just want to endorse your point about healthcare, Marta, and I would add elderly care to that. I mean, if you're my generation, you see your parents aging or also passing away, and I think it just makes you realize that, given, of course, where we are with aging, and so health and elderly care is an enormous challenge coming upon us for society. And if we live in a bit long distance from our loved ones, like many of us perhaps do, you start realizing little things of technology, even if it's a WhatsApp video call. But I think it goes much beyond. I think technology, robotics, what you mentioned about surgery, I hear things, it might sound strange, but there are going to be robots for the simple daily aid that is needed in the healthcare. So that just as a side thought, it goes a bit to using technology for the good of mankind in general. Now back to more concretely, I think risk management. I start with something very basic. So the internet computer, there's a website that you can go to called dashboard.internetcomputer.org. And the first thing you'll see is a map of the world and little blue dots. And those blue dots are the nodes, as we call them, the little servers, computers on which the internet computer runs. Like, consider that as a layer on top of the internet that we have built, because it requires quite some bespoke, specific servers that we've been, like mushrooms, growing across the world. And it's quite important. The physical point of being decentralized, to your question, Alex, it's avoiding a single point of vulnerability. Geographically, we now have a challenge. We need to further have it in the southern hemisphere. The internet was built such that it would resist a nuclear attack. So a network should be geographically decentralized. We also, the internet computer has, let's not definitive foundation. This is what we call the network nervous system. This is everyone who has voting rights in this big cooperative of the internet computer. The cooperative members are anyone who holds one single ICP. So you buy one token and that's your vote. You buy 10 tokens, you have more votes. You hold them longer, you have even more votes. So that big community that decides where the internet computer is going in a kind of open source way. And one key thing is it shall be very decentralized. If you want to be such a node provider, the community votes on it. So if Jeff Bezos would come along and he says, he easily can buy up the entire server network of the internet computer. It will go up for a vote. And people will probably decide, no, we're not going to have one single person buy 99% of our nodes. So that's point number one, the risk management. And the second is, you should consider something like data and the computer, which we believe is a renovating and revolutionary way of the third generation of blockchain. It's simply because if you look at the picture in Melissa's background, let's take there's a JPEG file, and we hold thousands of them on this little device in my hand, right? We all take pictures with this little smartphone. I would ask you, what do you think does it cost to store one single picture on a blockchain? Until now, this costed more than 100 times the cost of this iPhone. So what projects on the web metaverse like Melissa are doing, it would not have been possible unless you kind of.
I think we lost Paul. Oh. Paul, can you hear us?
Yes, am I back?
You're back, yes. You were talking
Okay.
about the phone and storing it in the metaverse,
Yeah.
the picture.
Right, and storing it really on the metaverse was until recently not possible because it was as slow, as expensive as an old mainframe. And what we've been working on for the past 7 years of heavy R&D, we employ about 150 cryptographers, PhDs in computer science over here, and also in Palo Alto, in San Francisco, is finding a way to crack that nut, to still have the advantage of the decentralized security that you have when you have a decentralized blockchain, but still for it to work in a cost-efficient and rapid way. And that is essentially the breakthrough. If the type of things that you can do on the metaverse, pieces of art in digital form, a Swiss watch that you can take a 3D scan of, and such rich picture is your NFT that you hold as a digital certificate of ownership of that Swiss watch, and so forth and so forth. This is much more rich data, and to have that in a secure way, the risks well managed on a decentralized network. That is one of the key things why we built the internet computer, and in a way that it's safe, it is decentralized, and still those creators of whatever is the metaverse object are keeping their ownership.
Thank you very much. So your risk is tied very much to the infrastructure as well and the ownership. That makes sense. And now over to you, Sankit. I just got a question in the chat. There's already a few questions and comments if you want to. But one user, Ricardo, is asking, what would you do to demystify the use of the metaverse in business? Sankit, I think you're in business supply chain. That's clearly a very business activity, a corporate activity. That's a perfect question. How do you approach it? Because that Ricardo is asking, a lot of people still afraid of the term. CTOs or corporates are afraid. Elaborate. What's your take? Metaverse and business as well as supply chain.
So I was reading the question as well, and I found it very interesting. Thanks for the question, Ricardo. I am not going to speak about the metaverse. I'm not an expert here like some other people on the panel. I'm going to speak about Web3, blockchain, decentral systems, and do a take on that question there. For me, the Web3 is a revolution. So I think Paul already used the word revolution once. For me, it's a revolution. However, it's a revolution evolution. That's what I like to call it. It's not something which disrupts the old internet, the Web 2, and tomorrow we have everything which is brand new, and we stop everything with the old. This is not happening. The adoption is taking its time. You know, the blockchain Web3, it's been around for a couple of decades now. The idea has been around for a couple of decades. I was on a panel a couple of weeks back about Web3 adoption in supply chain transparency, and supply chain transparency is for me one of the killer use cases of blockchain, because it really ties in all the advantages that you have of Web3 into an industrial business perspective. You have trust between actors who would otherwise not trust each other. You have the way to make things transparent, and transparency is for me very closely tied with democracy. Right, and it's also goes back to the topic of reducing the risk for us as a society, society as a whole. because we are able to really see through, if I have a product and if somebody's telling me, yeah, it's sustainable, or my company has reached net zero, I'm not employing children in my supply chain, no child labor, things like this. They're just telling me, do I really trust this person? But if I get the data, and if I get immutable data, then it really brings trust to me. So these are really the use cases which Web3 actually makes possible in business. One of the big questions that I often get asked is, Web3 in supply chain traceability, supply chain transparency. People have been speaking about it for 10 years at least now. Real industrial-wide use cases, where are they? Where is the adoption? Right? And this question, it's a very interesting question. And my answer always is it is a revolution. Evolution, first of all, and Web3 will be really successful in business when people stop asking this question, do you really need blockchain to solve it? Do you really need a metaverse? Do you need Web3 to solve this? When they stop asking that, when it becomes such a matter of fact that people believe it's the best way to go, it is the state of the art, we are going to build on it. It's like the internet today. It's like currency back then. So currency being given by a central bank. Who asks today, what are the mechanisms behind this currency thing? What is a 1 franc or a $1 note? What does it really signify? How is inflation tied into it? Can I really trust this 1 franc note or 1 franc coin to get me the services or products that I want to buy? Nobody asks that today, right? It's such a matter of fact. And I believe true adoption will be when people really stop asking that question. So that's my take on that question there. Yeah.
Thank you, Sanki. There's a few more questions relating to real use cases. You just try to give an answer. Maybe now moving on to, I'll have this in a bit more open. So any one of you who feels like confident to answer, feel free. I'm not going to call you out unless no one has anything to say. But moving on to the users, I mean that big, it's sort of tied into the use case. Where are the users in the metaverse and in Web3? Because if you talk to the layperson, they say, well, I just read that Facebook killed its metaverse unit, Disney killed its metaverse unit. So any one of you, where, if I want to experience, as it is an experience, the metaverse, where do I go? Where can I see users? Where can I interact? Any good examples?
Can I maybe jump in? Because a lot of people totally underestimate that depending on how you define the metaverse, and Melissa obviously is very much on blockchain, decentralized. This is our big vision as what the metaverse is. But if we look at when you say where are the users and where already metaverse-like experiences are being used is in the games. And we have 3 billion gamers. Yeah. So no matter perhaps that we don't see a lot of users in Decentralized or in other blockchains. I mean, we have 1 million nearly in Second Life, which people think is totally dead. So you have lots of metaverse experiences where you have lots of users, and then you have all the statistic where you have like 8 or 10. And for me, when we look at the gaming is basically the entry point and the gateway to the metaverse. And we see that already now. We see a big transition, and 3 billion are not only the 18 to 25 years old. There are also there are a lot of women, by the way, over 50% of gamers are women on mobile. And this all starts to get into the adoption. So the other question for me, which is related to this, is how do we increase adoption? One has said here, no one really sees it. And where we start, and that what's the core in essence when we work with companies, we also we build metaverses, but it's the experience. So even though a company might come and say, I want to have in Decentraland, I want to have a presence because there are all the banks, take an example, then it's very important that you give experiences. And also the question was in Zurich, for sure, everywhere. You don't have to buy the MetaQuest. Go where there are experiences also for free. Go to events where this is being offered. And there are lots of events out there where you can have experiences. Not only the talk we have today, which is a super intro, but for me, it's really try it on. And once you have tried it, you understand as one says, the name of the game, because you feel what Melissa and everyone is feeling here is the immersiveness and how it's you. It's not separate. The metaverse is not separate. It's all interconnected. And Melissa made this also very clear. It's one part. And if we realize that, because we feel it's real, then we also increase the adoption tremendously.
Thank you very much, Marta. Obviously, events, it's a very open community. That is very true. You know, you can participate. I think that's also a question. I don't know, Melissa or Paul, anyone who wants to experience your metaverses, where would they go?
Yeah, maybe let me answer this question try to combine it with also one of the questions I see from the audience there, which is metaverse and AI, because I really like to also put these two topics together to talk about the adoption, future of adoption and users, because I think we see a perfect example here from what's going on that we see for ChatGPT over the past few months. I mean, AI has been a topic, existed for years, right? It's not a new topic. And then it has been through many cycles, many doubts, and then, denial from people, like, is it really going to change our life? Is it really working? And then until we see ChatGPT do, which is a massive, adoptions where they, break the record of achieving 100 million users within 2 months time. So in my opinion, it's similar to think about the metaverse in the way it's very normal that we're going through the cycles from, late 2021 when Meta renamed it, you see such a hype until right now, all the big companies say that we're cutting the business there. But the thing I want to remind everyone to think about is metaverse is really just not one product, right? It's not a product any giant like Meta, Google, can claim that I own it. Right, it's the product I build. It's really a broad technology or the platform, and I really think that we will come to a point that we see a ChatGPT equivalent, product happening in metaverse, and this is the trigger that I will see the massive adoption that people see that actually it's related to my day-to-day life. We might not see suddenly one day we wake up like metaverse kind of replace everything we do right now. I don't think that's going to happen, but it might start from very simple use case. That simple use case could be simply replacing what we do the meeting right now, right? Could be suddenly immerse everyone in a more 3D experience, virtual experience conference. Very simple. And then think about the when that's what I say, like when you combine AI and metaverse, I see more and more likely that it's going to be more impactful. Giving you an example, right now, many people, I think some of people have read on the news that many people claim that the existing metaverse, such as Decentralized and then Sandbox, it's pretty much like a dead city, right? There's really nothing, no one is really going there actively. But personally, I think there are two reasons. One is lack of use cases, things happening there. And secondly is that when you go there, you don't feel a personal attachment to yourself. But think about it, when, one day we can combine that virtual experience with, AI, you're gonna completely feel different. Thinking about, give you an example, like you go to a metaverse and then to join a virtual maybe concert within the metaverse. Maybe the concert is actually, the music is driven by AI, and then it can also kind of adapt, the type of the music that you listen to, and then based on your feedback, all these kind of more personal, touches to the experience, I think is going to be the game changer. So in short, I'm not worried about right now that we don't see the user. Going back to the very beginning, what I mentioned, I think it's a whole bigger thing like people can imagine. And then we are right now, what Shiku is doing is really trying hard to build our platform and build the application. And then we hope that by the time that moment come, we are the key players that's delivering that, simple use cases to people. Yeah.
Perfect. Maybe Alex, I can add without, I was hesitant to do marketing, but since Melissa is also talking about her platform, I built the Metaverse, and why I built this is really to give the platform, as you said, to help people to understand what it is. And you can go in, you asked, how do you go in? You can go in by desktop. Yeah, so simple Chrome browser, you type it in and people can contact me after this call on LinkedIn and I can basically send them the link and you go in directly. You have an avatar in 2 minutes and that's how easy it is. And even only when you have no immersiveness, people realize, wow, so I have a beach, I have very beautiful things there. Everything I love is very, very personal space to me. I'm the first influencer basically worldwide who has started to use this as a content platform. I do events. I do exactly what you described, Melissa. So we do collaboration, we work there, we do workshops, and we do everything there. And even via desktop, you feel like, wow, this is my avatar. This is my extended self, and you get it. You don't have glasses on. You can do the same with mobile and you can do it with glasses. It's a different experience. But I think the lower we have the entry points for people to try, the better it is. So you don't even have to go to somewhere. You can sit here, you can do it, and you can try. And my one is not the only one who works like that. There's a whole world out there. You can give a whole list of how you can do it, and people do it. And who are the most advanced one we talked about is the gamers, but more so also the fashion people. So everyone who is in fashion is now in the metaverse. And KPMG estimated 70% of brands will be in the metaverse by 2027. Gartner expect 25% of people spend an hour in a day in a couple of years' time. So this is massive.
Thank you, Marta. And actually, Paul is doing a great job by answering questions and chatting away while we're to all the wonderful questions we get. And maybe that's a perfect segue. Paul, I also want to ask you where I can experience the Definity metaverse, but maybe you also ask at the same time the other a bit bewildering question. And the question is the metaverse is decentralized and global. Why does location matter? Why are you guys here in Switzerland? And maybe you can tie this together, Paul, and give us an insight why nations or locations still matter in the metaverse. Interested to hear what your thoughts are.
Sure. Like on your first question, I can be short. Developing the metaverse, we leave to people like Melissa. So you can look at internet computer. It's an imperfect analogy, but if we use Windows, an operating system, kind of consider us as the operating system. On Windows, then you have applications like your Microsoft Word processor. Well, applications, we leave that to ecosystem partners, as we call them, like what Melissa is doing. So that's why there isn't really a metaverse version of internet computer. We are the backbone on which wonderful other metaverses are developed. On your question about Switzerland, yeah, I posted some in the chat. I mean, it's I won't repeat them, but it's what makes this country and economy small but beautiful, right? Talent, security, stability, stable governance, a sensible regulator that is moving on with time, like FINMA for the financial markets. It has issued regulations, so you.
I think we lost Paul again.
Okay, try again.
Now you're back. Sometimes okay. You get frozen. You were talking about beautiful regulation, or at least about regulation, sensible regulation, and a beautiful country.
Interesting that it broke off then. I think we have censorship. Yeah, there's a regulator that is, joking aside, that is sensible. So you can Google and look for FINMA token classification. I'm sure you'll find the three classifications that FINMA has issued early on. You can also speak to the regulators. Some people asked, okay, why Zug, Zurich or so? I'm a Belgian Swiss citizen, and it's been 20 years that I'm here now. I was a bit puzzled when I came to Switzerland. Why are these things so decentralized? You have Bern, then you have the cantons, and then you even vote on local things for your commune. But I think it's the proximity. When you create a business here, you walk over to the Zug or the Zurich business development department, and they work kind of hand in hand with the tax department and with the regulators. You have a feel that you are close to the administration. And then there's, of course, also exceptional high concentration of talent. For this little country, it is amazing that it's the largest office of Google outside the United States. It has an IBM research center. it has CERN in Geneva, it has EPFL, it has ETH. So those, I think, are some of the reasons, most of which I think is repetition, but I think in the context of blockchain, it's worthwhile mentioning. One thing, Alexander, that I would mention to maybe counter or balance a little bit what we've said. I mean, here's the economist risk manager in me. I would honestly also say it's not all rosy. It's not all that easy. There is risk involved, and that is logical. And innovators do something because they're pushing the boundaries. And when you push the boundaries, you try 5 things, 4 fail, and the 5th one is the great next new thing. And the reason I mentioned that you said before about risk management, well, what's a very simple notion in risk management, that if you have a company, why do you have equity? Well, equity is for a rainy day, right? When things go sour, that's what as shareholders or founders, you need to have a little bit of buffer so you can go through the volatile times. I think one of the reasons why that's very important, especially for Switzerland, if you think about NFTs, if you think about Metaverse, in some way, those things need to have custody, right? Like when you have your share, even if you have gold, or even if you have some certificate, some people go and put their piece of art in the vault with the bank. Switzerland has always been a haven of safety. Now, this is now moving to the digital world. So a lot of banks are trying to figure out, oh my God, this thing is changing. So we have done a lot of business holding custody, from having a depot where people hold their shares, from people going to the banks and putting their expensive jewelry in the vault. How do we now get this next new thing? Because it seems that the next thing people are investing in is not just the real Picasso, but the digital NFT of the Picasso. So how do we want to get a piece of that custody? Because the banks start realizing there's a new custody of digital assets evolving. And there's a lot of criticism. The SEC has published some regulations some while ago, which the banks thought immediately was crazy, because the SEC basically says those type of assets you hold custody of are quite risky and you need to hold sufficient capital for that. And the simple, I mean, what banks always want to have as little as equity as possible, right? It's clear, because return on equity incentivizes them to keep the equity low. And you might wonder, what does that have to do with cryptocurrency? I think very much, because I think some of the banks realize you can't have the cake and eat it. You can't be part of this big new innovative thing and not be prepared to have some sufficient reserve or equity for that. And as we have recently seen, banks always push to keep capital low. And when things go bad, and it seems every 5 years something really goes bad, we saw one here a week ago, who has to put up for these banks who always says that capital needs to be low? Basically, the national bank and the taxpayers. I think banks have to realize that if they move a little bit to this digital world, if you look at the big Silicon Valley tech companies, they have been, over time, as they became profitable, they have billions of cash and cumulative net earnings. And because they want to keep that to build the next grand smartphone, or to have giga-size factories. And these technology-driven companies are not just driven by having enough dividends to keep the shareholders happy or filling up bonus pools. They are realizing if you're in the different innovation business, you need to have sufficient reserve, and that is reserve also means equity to build up the next new thing. So understanding cybersecurity, understanding what it means to do private key management, understanding what is the difference between hot, cold, and warm storage, key ceremonies. Well, as a bank, you have to realize, get real. This is the type of things you need to understand. If you're still stuck in the mainframe or AS400 on which your COBOL programs work, well, move to the new world. And this is quite an innovative thing, and fighting back against regulators who are crazy because they put up high capital requirements. Well, you need to realize that when you go into new territory, you need to have a little bit reserve. And I think this new way of thinking about innovation is quite of a mindset change. I think as it regards like holding custody of these new digital type of assets.
Thank you, Paul. It's a very interesting aspect, and maybe as I'm aware of time, we got 10 minutes left. If anyone in the audience has a specific question, I've seen a few questions already been answered. Anything you want to address, post it now. But maybe as we're slowly approaching the end, and you've been touching that, Paul, what are the biggest obstacles to adoption? Obviously, you know, keeping your own digital assets with private keys and passwords and seed phrases is not the most user-friendly way of interacting with the internet. So that is often something that comes up. And I guess the second topic that often comes up, and that's always been mentioned in the chat, is ID. How do you identify people? Because in this decentralized fashion, obviously, it's a challenge. How can you identify someone on various levels? And there's different concepts out there, zero knowledge proof and such. But anyone on the panel wants to tackle the more thorny issues of what needs to be solved in order for this really to become big. Any insights from the panel?
Yeah, maybe I could start with a joke. Okay. I was thinking a little bit about Metaverse and what was being described. And I think, once again, going back to the test of real adoption, the real adoption really happens when people stop asking, why do you need it? And I think it'll be similar with the Metaverse when you maybe don't have the Metaverse, but you have a multiverse. I think that's also a new phrase being strengthened by the lot of Oscars that were won this year, where you kind of combine kind of the way you interact in daily life with business, with society, with friends, family, and so on, with the digital tools, the right digital tools. So if you kind of combine that, it becomes the multiverse, and I think that's what will drive adoption. So that's a bit of a joke, but I think to come back to your question, Alexander, I think it needs innovation. It needs really user-friendly tools to make things easy. You know, whether it is storing your crypto tokens, getting your identity, and things like this. When all of these things become matter of fact, then we can move to kind of the next phase of adoption, where real use cases start to get converted from Web 2 to Web 3. And then there would be a second wave of adoption where new use cases, which actually Web 3 and Metaverse would enable, would start to be thought about. You know, hey, we can now, since we have all the users on the Metaverse, on Web 3 platforms, we can now start to really disintermediate, for example, you know, really remove inefficiencies from supply chains and so on. So that's what's required. And I think we are still at a very early stage as far as adoption is concerned.
Yeah, I think the other part which we also realized from the internet side is that regulation and frameworks, and Paul also, I think everyone described this very well, is not yet fully there. It's normal in innovation that basically tech is ahead of regulation. And we have in the EU, for example, new regulation about digital identity. Everyone should have one. So all that stuff, I would say, is moving. And Paul mentioned banks. Banks have started now to get the bridge to digital assets. So we have in Switzerland, we have Signum, we have Julius Baer having a separate unit for digital assets. We have VP Liechtenstein with the so-called Picasso digital assets, and people get more and more use cases also in real life for heritage purpose when they have digital assets. And what you also have, which is quite nice, is you have more use cases where you don't keep the digital identity yourself with the key, and when you lose it, you have a problem. There are also now offerings, and banks are looking at this obviously as well. They work with Menaco, they work with Fireblocks to get this bridge that you help your client to basically you keep it, because you as a bank, you have huge trust from your client, and so far that trust has been quite valid, I would say, Paul. Yeah.
Thank you, Marta. Any other thoughts on the obstacles? So, I mean, I guess there's a bit of split between the B2C and B2B market. Obviously, anything in the B2B space, be it banks, be it corporates, or supply chain, takes longer because they're big, gigantic things. And I guess anything in the consumer space can move faster because there's adoption that can happen. Any other insights, any other big obstacles you're seeing or things you're working on that need to be fulfilled to make this vision reality?
Yeah, I think others here on the panelist are closer to like branding and consumer behavior type things. As an economist, I would just say, if you look back in history, it's often been a combination of a systemic change. So let's say the internet was a systemic change. But then I remember when this modem was beeping and zooming in my parents' room, they were wondering what on earth I was doing until you show them email. And I said, wow, so you're really sending this? And when you push the button, Auntie Elisa in Melbourne sees it 2 seconds later? Wow. That was, I think everything needs at some point some eye-opening experience. And when Steve Jobs held up the iPhone, maybe that was the next eye-opening experience. So I'll leave it, I think the others here are closer to branding and what really is the next big thing. But I suspect there's going to be one of these days, this kind of aha erlebnis, this kind of moment when people realize, and that probably needs to be something that the man and lady in the street feel like it touches their daily life, like the email perhaps was, or the WhatsApp that grandma and grandchildren brings together. On the other, so that is more the breakthrough user experience. And I think on the other side, the point that was touched is probably simplicity. I know that computer scientists perhaps don't want to hear that because I understand they tend to say, well, it isn't that simple. And then they educate you about the sophistication of cryptography. And that's all very valid. But for the average user, we heard it before, things need to become sufficiently mundane and simple so that they are really adopted. In the background, things need to be secure, absolutely. But I think there is a level of sophistication that is not yet such that there would be broad adoption. So I think some simplification and some eye-opening, breakthrough, simple daily life experiences, I think could be the breakthrough.
I think it's a very good summary, Paul. I'm very conscious of time. I think we're about to end, but I think when I summarize what all of you said is we're talking obviously about data. There will be more data in the future that we'll be owning or transacting with, whatever that is. That data needs to be stored, it needs to be transacted, it needs to be safe. And ideally, it creates experiences of a new kind. So we'll see if that will happen in the traditional sectors or if there's going to be something separate emerging or a fusion of those two. I think we're still at a very early stage. And you still need all the enablers from a framework, from talent, from a framework, from a jurisdiction point of view where you can have the regulatory certainty. And I think Switzerland can provide that. With that, I'd like to hand over back to our host, Sirpa, and thank you very much for your contributions.
So thank you, Alexander, for moderating, and also thank you, Melissa, Marta, Sanket, and Paul for sharing your insight about Web3 and the Metaverse. And I think Marta said it at the beginning, and it came up again with Paul and Alexander. You have to start with an experience. Yes, so I hope this discussion was an exciting experience for you as well. And if you want to dive deeper into the Swiss experience about Web3 and Metaverse, please give us a call or email us. I think we have the email on a slide as well, where you can reach us. And I also saw some very specific questions about how to get a license in Switzerland. So we can assist with those specific regulatory questions about Switzerland and why companies are setting up their Web3 or blockchain ventures in Switzerland. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. So with this, yes, thank you for joining this conversation, and we wish you a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Yes, thank you.
Bye.